This morning, the former president will be seated in a Manhattan courtroom for the start of a civil fraud trial against him. The former president arrived at his one-time home of Trump Tower last night, a building that could soon be taken away from him, pending the decision of Judge Arthur Engoron. A non-jury trial last week found the judge in that non-jury trial found Trump and his two oldest sons and his company liable of fraud in a case brought by New York Attorney General Letitia James. Today, the punishment phase of the trial will begin, where the former president could be fined $250 million and forced to give up all of his New York State properties. Although he is on the witness list for both the defense and the prosecution, it is unclear if Trump will testify at the trial. This is massive. Let's bring in former FBI General Counsel, now an NBC News legal analyst, Andrew Weissmann. The reporter on the investigations desk at the New York Times, Russ Buettner, joins us once again. Thank you so much, both of you. Let's start with you, Russ, on the very latest on this case. Once again, this is not if he's liable for fraud. This is how much he pays for it, correct?
That's exactly right. There's a few moving parts in this. There's going to be some kind of financial analysis that hasn't been explained yet, I don't think, about how you calculate the financial benefit that he obtained in doing this, whether that's going to be the hundreds of millions of dollars in loans that he obtained, or just the difference between the beneficial interest rate he received on those and a lower rate. I don't think that's yet quite clear. The Attorney General has estimated that to be $250 million. I think that suggests that it could go even higher than that. And then they'll get to what the receiver will do in trying, I think, to maintain enough assets and the performance of those assets to make sure that he'll have access to pay whatever judgment is finally determined.
Well, and Andrew, also, of course, the possibility of him having to forfeit some of his properties in New York City, as well as his business license for the state. What's the likelihood of that happening?
I think it's very likely. As Mika said, in many ways, this trial's over. The judge has already ruled on the first of the claims against Donald Trump and his sons and his businesses. And so, as Russ said, it's really just a question of what is the financial penalty in terms of the amount of money that will be disgorged from Donald Trump and his companies. But having a receiver and his losing his licenses in New York is something the judge has already concluded with respect to the first count. There are 6 other counts there that are being tried this week that involve needing to show Donald Trump's intent and also whether he damaged any insurance companies or any banks. And that's the reason that I think Letitia James has him on a witness list to call him, because I think she's banking on the fact, no pun intended, that he will be a terrible witness. He obviously has shown that in the E. Jean Carroll case, and that obviously will be where there's fireworks. But the big picture is he's already lost. With huge financial consequences that this judge has imposed.
So, Russ, let's talk about that possibility. We know Donald Trump is here in New York City, arrived last night. He could certainly attend the proceedings this week. They sit in the courtroom. He's also been called as a potential witness for both sides of this case. His sons have as well. So walk us through what you expect him to do. And if he were to take the stand, what would he say, and would any lawyer suggest that's a good idea?
I think it's always hazardous to try to guess what Donald Trump's going to do or what the boundaries will be on his behavior. I would suspect that he will show up for 1 or 2 days of this thing, and he'll make a big spectacle of arriving, make a big spectacle of departing, say something outrageous on the steps outside the courthouse. There won't be cameras inside the courtroom, so we won't see him there. He doesn't have to risk the kind of embarrassment of sitting at a table in a courtroom for long hours while attorneys lay him out in filth, essentially. And then whether somebody's going, obviously, as you said, nobody would want him to testify. That could not be productive for his case. But there are 2 ways I think it could go, and I'm sure Andrew could say more about this. If the prosecutors call him, if the Attorney General's office call him, he would most likely wisely take the fifth at virtually everything they asked. But that's very hard for Donald Trump to do. He did that somewhat during his deposition. He also said some outrageous things. Or if we get to the end of this trial, which is expected to last several weeks, and it looks like they're going to get their clock cleaned on this, and there's nothing much to lose, maybe they put him up there and let him take a shot at saying something that might turn the judge. That again seems ill-advised and I think highly unlikely.
Whatever. So, Andrew, a couple of questions.
Could you imagine being in such a bad position
that you have to put him
that
up
you say
there?
the only thing we have left is letting Donald Trump testify in the court of law.
And
That's our last chance.
He did so well during his defamation trial where he told E. Jean Carroll's attorney that E. Jean Carroll wasn't his type and that the attorney that he was speaking to wasn't his type either and snarled at her.
Well,
I thought that was a special touch.
That was also where he actually
touch.
said that throughout history, that men like him were able to do whatever he wanted to do.
It's just the truth, you know.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Okay, so that's a
stellar witness.
If you need to know anything about Donald Trump, it's important to watch that deposition. Yeah. So, Andrew, a couple of things. Number one, you pointed out that it's already been concluded that a receiver has to be put in place. I want to understand what that means for Donald Trump's businesses right now. How does that actually work? How does that impact his actual business with other people? Do people still want to do business with him if his company is in this situation? Things like that. And then also, if you could touch on the federal case, election interference, Jack Smith asking for a gag order. What does that mean? Will it happen?
Sure. Just one thing to note, if Donald Trump takes the stand and actually testifies, whether it's for Letitia James or the defense, let's just take one example. He claimed that his own personal residence in Trump Tower was 30,000 square feet. Even the defense lawyers before this judge conceded that was wrong. And the judge is like, how do you not know that it's 10,000 feet? And then, use that to, as the court found, defraud insurance companies and banks by saying he has more assets than he has. And that's one of the reasons for facts like that, which are just so plainly fictitious, that the judge appointed a receiver. What that means is essentially the Attorney General for New York is in charge of protecting New Yorkers from what's called persistent fraudsters. And that's what the court found that Donald Trump and his companies and his sons are. And so the receiver gets to essentially make sure that he is not doing business in New York. Mika, you raised a really good question about whether that's already a huge financial penalty and sanction, whether that also leads to banks and insurance companies basically pulling the plug or not financing anymore is going to be a big open question. But there already are really significant consequences because this is where Donald Trump's main businesses are. So huge factor for him in terms of his companies, in terms of all sorts of business interests that he has here that he no longer will be in control of. And then with respect to the gag order, that is now fully briefed before the D.C. federal judge. And as you noted at the outset, Donald Trump does not seem to be deterred in any way, shape, or form from the fact that he is making these outrageous comments, including about, as you noted, Paul Pelosi, which is beyond shocking. And there's no question that for a federal judge, that is going to be a big deal because it shows such complete callousness and just complete disregard for the fact that he is out on bail, not in one case, but 4 criminal cases. So there is a hearing that is scheduled in 2 weeks before the judge where the parties will address that issue and argue, and then she will make a ruling.